Australia's Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has called for national elections on May 3rd, setting a 5-week campaign period in motion.
Observers are expecting cost of living pressures to dominate the rallies amid surging housing prices and energy costs.
Our government has chosen to face global challenges the Australian way, helping people under cost of living pressure while building for the future. Because of the strength and resilience that our people have shown, Australia is turning the corner. Now, on the 3rd of May, you choose the way forward.
Australia adheres to 3-year term limits, which means the country must go to the polls by May 17th to select their new parliament. Mr. Albanese is seeking a second term in office. He heads the Labour Party and will face off with opposition leader Peter Dutton. While both contenders have blue-collar backgrounds, which set them apart from former leaders more typically educated at top-end universities with careers in banking or law, Mr. Albanese hopes to secure a second term in office. He took part in his first political activity at the tender age of 12, joining residents to successfully block an attempt by the local government to sell their homes. He joined the Labour Party in 1979 and was elected to the federal seat of Greelander in 1996. Mr. Albanese was selected as the leader of the House of Representatives in 2007 when former Labour leader Kevin Rudd was elected Prime Minister. He became leader of the Labour Party and Australia's opposition leader in 2019. Mr. Albanese successfully led Labour through the May 2022 election, ousting Scott Morrison to become Australia's 31st Prime Minister. He is a backer of renewable energy, an advocate for the LGBT community, and describes himself as a Republican, which means he supports replacing Australia's constitutional monarchy. Meantime, Mr. Dutton is a bricklayer's son raised in the suburbs of Brisbane. He joined the state police after dropping out of uni. He was a narcotics detective before running for parliament in 2001, an experience he says has coloured his hard-nosed approach to law and order. Indeed, over the years, he's forged a reputation for enforcing tough immigration and border protection policies. In his rise to lead the Liberal Party, he's held various ministerial roles, including the defence and health portfolios, where he made unpopular cuts to the health budget from 2013 to 2014. Mr. Dutton has in the past few years been building a platform agitating for change in a bid to move the country away from Prime Minister Albanese's Labour government. Australian politics has long been dominated by the Labour and Liberal parties, but growing disenchantment among voters has emboldened independents pushing for greater transparency as well as climate progress. Polls suggest 10 or more non-aligned crossbenchers could hold the balance of power, which could force the formation of a rare minority government. Well, Natasha Gutierrez has more on what's top of mind for voters.
Let me start with key issues for this election, the stance of each party regarding these issues, then go into what polls are saying so far. First, as already mentioned, cost of living is really front and center here and will be top of mind for voters. So both parties are focusing on this and campaigning on policies they think will immediately ease voter spending. For Labour, they're focused on 3 main areas to achieve this: health, education, and childcare. They said they would offer a modest income tax cut, cheaper doctors' visits and lower cost medicines, and student debt relief. They've also said they will put $1 billion into building new childcare services. That's a huge issue and cost for young Australian families. As for the opposition, they've rejected proposed income tax cuts and said they will lower costs by making fuel cheaper and decreasing power bills. One main strategy they have is that they will force gas giants in the country to set aside supply for domestic use that would otherwise be exported, which they believe will cut wholesale prices by 40%. Opposition leader Peter Dutton also said he'd contribute to more money for youth mental health services and support local businesses. And interestingly, he also plans to remove 41,000 public service jobs to reduce what he calls bureaucratic waste, much like the government efficiency messaging of President Trump. It was also mentioned earlier, another key issue in these elections will be energy. Nuclear power is a key policy difference between the two parties. The opposition says building a nuclear energy network will help the transition away from coal, but Labor is focusing on renewables. As for polls, it's going to be a tight race. Surveys have shown the coalition, Labor, maintained a steady lead from the start of the year, but the gap has since narrowed, and most analysis of the polls actually suggest a hung parliament is likely, which has only ever happened twice in Australia's history. But of course, it's best to wait and see how the next 5 weeks play out.
For more, we're joined by Zareh Ghazarian. He's Head of Politics and International Relations at Monash University. Dr. Ghazarian, thank you so much for joining us this morning. I want to start by asking you what the mood is like based on most recent polling. I keep hearing it's going to be close, but close enough such that the Albanese team possibly might be the first Australian government not to win a second term in many, many decades?
Good morning. Yes, it is. There is some sort of sense of relief that the election campaign has now formally started. And you are right. The polls are indicating that the Labor Party, led by Mr Albanese, has lost some support. It has gone to the coalition led by Mr Dutton. But it doesn't appear that that support being enjoyed by the coalition is going to be enough to allow them to win a majority government. And the situation is highly dependent and linked to what happened in 2022. That was a very close election. Labor won by winning just 77 out of the 151 seats in the House of Representatives, giving Labor a very thin majority. This time, thanks to redistributions and changes in population, the number of seats is 150. So a party must win at least 76 seats to win government in their own right. And it looks as though Labor's going to probably lose some seats. The coalition's probably going to win some seats, but it's hard to see who's going to end up with that magic number of at least 76.
What would you say will voters be most concerned about in this election? Is it housing, cost of living, the climate?
Really, it's all of those things. We have to think back to 2022 when the last election was held in Australia, and that was really in the shadow of the COVID-19 pandemic. 3 years since then, we're no longer, of course, like the rest of the world, no longer talking about the pandemic as much as we did, but the impact, the social and economic impact of the pandemic is still with us. And we can see it in terms of the cost of living, in terms of the increases in costs of food, of energy. There were, of course, logistics challenges in terms of importing goods during lockdowns, and the backlog of all that had massive implications for cost of living. So the price of goods and services, as well as energy, in addition to, of course, housing availability and affordability, are going to be really prominent issues over this 5-week campaign.
Mr Albanese appears to have lowered the temperature in local domestic politics, and he probably can argue he did the same with China while strengthening ties with the United States as well. Is that going to matter at all to Australians, or is all politics local?
Of course, general elections are always going to be focused predominantly on local domestic issues. But those cases that you mentioned in terms of international affairs, international relations, are still very important because, of course, they tie in with economic arguments as well as arguments about security, regional security, national security, and the national interest. So certainly the links between Australia and the US is very important for the Australian electorate. Links between Australia and China are equally important, thanks to the importance of trade and business links there. So they will be a feature but certainly I think the parties will be much more comfortable talking about what their plans are in terms of reducing cost of living pressures.
Can we talk about voter demographics? You know, I saw reports saying that this federal election will be the first where Gen Z, millennials, they will outnumber boomers everywhere in the country. How is this going to impact the messaging and strategy of campaigns over the next 5 weeks, and how will it impact results ultimately?
This is a really interesting dynamic that we're seeing in the Australian electorate, the changing generations. And of course, it coincides with the rise of social media and new sorts of platforms and communication strategies that the parties have already been using and will continue to be upskilling in to try and connect with all sorts of voters, especially younger voters. But certainly it is going to be a real test of how the established parties are going to be able to connect with newer voters. We've done some research in Australia that indicates that young voters are certainly not a homogenous group, and they have their own reasons and their own approaches to determining who they'll be voting for, especially when we look at first-time voters. So the issues that are going to be talked about, including housing affordability, cost of living, as well as climate change and energy policy, certainly are universal enough to be able to resonate with older as well as younger voters.
Dr. Ghazarian, I mean, the two men, the two party leaders, if you like, have similar backgrounds. I mean, where would the biggest difference lie in terms of their, I suppose, appeal to Australians and the issues that they are most concerned about?
It's interesting. I think the major parties have identified cost of living as the issue they want to pursue throughout the campaign. And we've seen that through the announcement that in this week's budget by the Treasurer, Jim Chalmers, made. The Labor Party has put incremental changes to income tax that will be coming in at the next financial year. The Coalition, while it has supported those changes through the Senate, so they've gone through, the Coalition itself has also proposed a cut in fuel excise by 25 cents per litre for a year, which essentially means cheaper petrol for vehicle users for that year. And these are the respective keynote addresses that the parties believe is going to turn the tide when it comes to cost of living pressures. But there are other sorts of differences there as well in terms of energy. The Labor Party appears much more comfortable in supporting and talking about renewable energy strategies, while the Coalition is seemingly much more comfortable advocating for new nuclear technologies to be used in Australia. So there are going to be certain overlaps, but the parties are taking slightly different approaches, and the devil is going to be in the detail for voters.
Indeed, and we'll find out more in the next 5 weeks or so. Dr. Ghazarian, thank you very much. Zareh Ghazarian is Head of Politics and International Relations at Monash Uni.